Right, thank you very much, Richard, for finding some time in your very busy schedule to have a chat to us. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and your school?
A bit about myself. I've been in education in England and over here in Australia for close to, must be close to 27, 28 years. Most of my time has been in special schools in the UK, worked in special schools for students with emotional and behavioural difficulties, and then in Australia, predominantly students with disabilities in mainstream high schools and now in 2 special schools. So, and I've been a special school principal for about 10 years now.
So I know you've recently moved to another special school, but I'm presuming you're going to talk mainly about Nambour Special School. So you're going to give people a bit of background to Nambour Special School.
So I was principal there for about 8 years. So we had roughly, around 150 students. It was in a regional part of the Sunshine Coast, and so was had steady growth over time and not too big growth, which was nice to manage. I think we had close to 30 classes and catered for students with a full range of disabilities. So students with intellectual disability, probably 80% of our students had 2 or more disabilities. So a number of students would have had intellectual disability with ASD, certainly a minority of students with physical impairments as well. So full range of students from prep to grade 12.
Great, thank you. So what challenges was the school facing prior to you implementing Team Teach?
I probably my first year as principal. I was there for about a year as DP, but my first year as principal, just reviewing some of the school data the first year. We in Queensland we do a school opinion survey data, and so staff have the opportunity to respond to a series of questions, as do parents, as do students. But just focusing on the staff data was, there was a question. It may have changed now, but is this a safe place to work? And our data that first year was low, or lower than I probably thought it was going to be. And so I probably saw an opportunity there where we needed to address that, because my role, firstly, is with my many hats as principal, my role from a workplace health and safety perspective is the provision of a safe workplace. My role educationally is to make sure that students are engaged as much as possible. So and that probably linked in predominantly with student behaviour is well managed at this school, which was also not as low, but not probably where I wanted it to be. So it was a response to data around safety and a response to data around management of student behaviour.
So why did you choose Team Teach?
A couple of reasons. We looked at a couple of frameworks. I'd had some experience with it in UK as well, so that there was knowledge of that. The principal, the previous principal before me was a trainer, a Team Teach trainer. But we looked at a number of different frameworks, and we just felt that Team Teach enabled us to give the really good training that we wanted to look at, and probably looked at a continuum of intervention. So the focus predominantly is on sort of prevention and being proactive and preventative, with managing, but still looks at the safety and obviously proactive strategies as well, and is predominantly that as well. So I certainly like the idea of the sort of 95% is proactive, and that's the message that I wanted to give to my staff, really. It also provided us with that yearly sort of retraining, or initially it was 2 years, and then so that commitment's ongoing as well. And it's not we do it once and then that's it. Like in all schools, it's been probably more so now. The amount of movement of staff in schools means that that one-off training, within 5 years, you've probably got 25-30% of your staff who are still trained, and 65-70% of your staff who are not. So yeah, that's something that we took into account, that there was a significant training initially, but there was that commitment to that yearly training as well, which is what we needed as well.
So you've spoken a little bit about this, but what did you like about the approach of the training?
I think from our perspective was that real focus on the theory. I think sometimes there's a misconception around, when you're talking around behaviour, and certainly complex behaviours potentially, that it's all around the reactive stuff, and probably from our perspective that real commitment to the theory side of things. I like the idea that if you chose as a school that you could do all theory on your first training, and that was a key bit for us. Developing staff knowledge around functions of behaviour, developing staff knowledge around restorative practice. From a principal perspective, the legal stuff as well was absolutely vital for me in making sure that everyone was absolutely sure of why we do things, when we do things, when not to do things, and then predominantly that the movement of the conversation from behaviour to safety was really critical for me. And that then supports, it changed that whole school language around. When we were talking about student management, it wasn't, we don't talk about, the movement from naughty behaviour to unsafe behaviour. It's more professional. There's less objectivity to it, and more objectivity to it. And it just became some of our language, and similar to our curriculum language, we have consistent curriculum language. It provided us with that consistent, language around what can be a really, really tricky part of schooling. So, and that's for me then, and that then crosses those boundaries with families. We don't talk about naughty behaviours, we talk about unsafe behaviours, and making behaviours safe, and putting plans in around unsafe behaviours, and it just makes those conversations between staff and staff, and then between home and school, a lot more professional and consistent. I think that's in a nutshell why I like the framework from Team Teach. In addition to that, it also had certainly some well-researched strategies for planning for when students, you get all the best laid plans, and it provided that, okay, if we've got this in place but this still happens, what we're going to do if a student's running near the road, what we're going to do. So we're not creating plans on the fly. So it gave us some really nice strategies around what is suitable paperwork and suitable planning, and then being able to actually train our staff to do things safely, because that's the end result. We certainly want to make sure that any intervention is safe. For that, it just ticked all our boxes in that respect. So.
Great, thank you. What would you say was the biggest impact Team Teach training had on the school?
From a principal, there's probably, I wear a number of different hats as principal. For me, I thought the focus on the legal stuff, which it doesn't have a huge impact on the ground, but I think just everyone having the knowledge of what legally what their responsibilities are, and it's certainly touched on in policy, but it really digs down into that, and it provides a real forum for that conversation around the why we do things, or the why we don't do things. It gave everyone that consistent language. It changed student management from a real emotive sort of situation where people felt that it becomes a really subjective, emotional thing when a student's maybe not doing the right thing or making bad choices in your class. But it just objectified it, and we could have really good conversations. And so one of my mantras is that I can't expect someone to do something if I haven't given them the skills to do it. And so the reality in the schools that I've worked in, we do have complex kids, and that's for a number of reasons. And if I want to create a workplace where people are confident in delivering curriculum, I'll do some training around curriculum. If I want people to be confident in being able to manage complex situations, then I need to give them the skills to manage complex situations. And Team Teach did that for us. And the value of upskilling staff is twofold. One is education, engagement becomes higher, outcomes are higher. And then from an admin perspective, my response my response is, assistance is required less and less, which is ideally what I want. I want to be not needed at all, really. So that's probably my from my perspective, the power of that. And certainly going back to Nambour, initially when we implemented it, the amount of call outs of assistance that was required for staff was really significant, and we were quite a small admin team at the time, and after I think we decided 6 weeks into term one, thinking where we'd sat at our desk like 5 times, probably more, I'm exaggerating. We made a decision that we need to provide the skills for our staff, because it wasn't that people didn't want to do it, it just they didn't have the confidence to do it, or the skills or the knowledge to be able to plan accordingly for students with with significant ASD, or put those proactive strategies in, and it linked so nicely to PBL. We were reviewing our PBL or implementing our PBL framework at the time, and there's such a strong link between that 95%, those proactive strategies, to the universal strategies in PBL, and then some of the supports around, good enough paperwork for your tier 2 and tier 3 kids was it just lined up really nicely, and so yeah, it ticked a number of our boxes. So
great, thank you for that. So what would you say to another school principal who's saying, we're looking at investing in using the team teach approach? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's I think, as a principal, you've got to make the best choices for your school. It's certainly something that in your context you would look at. Hopefully you look at a number of frameworks from us. Like I said, from a team teach perspective, if you've got PBL embedded already, then it would link really nicely with that. It provides that really good baseline knowledge of the whys and the whats of student behavior, not student behavior, of behaviors, and why we behave in certain ways. From my perspective, there's some really nice table activities that are involved in there. There's a big push around vision around that, and some really nice activities to get people to think of how they've responded to things, and how should we respond to things in the future. So there's some really strong activities to look at the culture of a school, which is absolutely vital. So from a baseline perspective around that, there's not there doesn't have to be a real strong focus on any sort of physical, or what happens if, worst case scenario, and schools can adapt that according to their cohorts. But I think giving that real strong grounding around functions of behaviors, restorative practice, the crisis cycle, I think it just builds confidence in your staff to manage things that maybe in the past they would have found for a bit of help, and it would have been really difficult situations. So by upskilling your staff in areas, you reduce the amount of incidents because of the things that have been put in place as daily or in every classroom. And it does. I think I have a number of conversations with our staff around we've all got the same training. I've not got any more training than you, so it's around that everyone's on the same level, and there's no experts in the school. We're all experts around making sure we can provide an environment that students can engage in. We've all got skills around, okay, if things do get a bit wobbly, what we're going to do, how are we going to manage it. And then we've also got systems in place as if, worst case scenario, that something happens, that we've got systems and processes to support the student and support the staff who are supporting the student. So, and also from my perspective, it just gives us that transparency with our parents around plans and the way to talk around difficult conversations, because when you're talking around student behavior, it becomes a challenging conversation. So it just gives us some structures around that coming from a safety perspective, we all want our kids to be safe, and whether I'm the parent or the teacher or the principal, there's no argument to that, because that's the most important thing. So yeah, I think, yeah, and probably the why should people do that is you can adapt. It is adaptable. It's not a one size fits all. There's certain topics that you need to touch on, but the training gives you that flexibility. if cultures there's some really nice activities that you can put into your training to say, okay, well, we'll spend a bit more time on culture because that's the important bit. So you can change it from year to year. So even though we deliver that year to year, we can next year we've implemented it here the first year. Next year we'll assess what's happened during the year, and we can say, okay, we really need to touch on this bit next year. So, and that gives us that flexibility as trainers to be able to do that, as long as, you know, working within that framework.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much.